Matthew Rhys, you play Philip Jennings, who is an undercover KGB agent in The Americans on FX, and two of the big events that the viewers had been anticipating for a while, finally happened this year. First of all, his daughter Paige found out the truth about him and his wife Elizabeth, and then Martha, who is his other wife, the wife of his alter ego, also learned that he wasn't who she thought he was. Did you know when the season got started, how those storylines were going to play out, and that those big events were coming up?
We certainly did about Paige, and now I can't actually remember whether or not the Martha storyline kind of evolved a little more. We're always subject to change, which is kind of great, keeps it, the ball in the air for us. But also, Joe Weisberg and Joel Fields are very open about, what the up-and-coming storylines are. So I remember them telling us about Paige and kind of thinking, oh my God, it's finally come to pass. And then the Martha stuff kind of crept up a little more. And I remember, being shocked when I was reading it, going, oh, wow. Yeah, it's all the worms are coming out.
Thinking about that scene first with Paige, that scene with you and Kerry Russell and Holly Taylor, who plays Paige. Tell me about shooting that big scene, that big moment after basically 3 seasons of anticipation that had been building up to it.
Well, it was, as you say, it was 3 seasons of anticipation. So it was strange because the entire crew were really kind of juiced up for it as well. They were like, oh my God, it's finally come. We've been lucky that, we've kind of had a continuity in the same crew for the 3 years. So I really got a sense of it when everyone there was like, how is this going to play out? And also, it was gratifying and satisfying to play because it is, as you say, a run-up of 3 years of kind of teasing the audience with what if she finds out. And they throw us this enormous T-bone steak to get our teeth into.
It's interesting how that scene feels kind of like a reversal of like a traditional coming out scene. You have a teenager with her parents, but it's actually the parents coming out to their child instead of the other way around. What did you think about that aspect of it, having Philip and Elizabeth be vulnerable to their daughter in that way?
I think it was a great sense of relief. I think what they've been living and dealing with, not just for 3 years, but obviously the advent of the run-up of their entire lives, is this pressure cooker life. There's the enormous duplicity they lead, the lives they lead, and I think that kind of pressure is just enormous on them. So I think more than anything, it was the greatest of relief to finally be able to say it, to speak truthfully with their daughter.
What do you think was scarier for Philip and Elizabeth? Maybe the fact that Paige might blow their cover and they'd get caught, or the real possibility that they might actually lose their daughter's love and affection.
I think everything had certainly an equal amount of weight to it. As you say, it was the unpredictability. I think that's the greatest worry in that moment as to how it'll go. Will she tell, Pastor Tim? Will she run away? Will she tell her brother? Will she tell the authorities? Will she ever speak to them again? There were so many doubts hanging over it, but it got, the weight of it all. And obviously her intuition got to such a degree that something had to eventually give. And in the end, they had no choice but to pull the trigger.
There's been kind of for the course of the series, there's been this wall between Philip and Elizabeth and the rest of the world, of course, because they've been hiding who they are from everyone but each other, basically, and maybe their handlers. Having them tell Paige that way, did that feel like it sort of opened up your relationship as actors with Holly Taylor in a way? Since suddenly your whole all your characters are in on the same secret.
Absolutely, it only when you layer in that much more, especially the scenes where Henry, the younger brother, is now present, but obviously unknowing. It just, it loads the bases in a way you can only dream of, because everything you do and say has obviously that much greater meaning. And yeah, there was an element of it was kind of coming of age for Holly, in that she, I suppose in a way, she was It was the very last of her innocence that we saw that was absolutely gone. And yeah, she's you know, she's an adult. I'm trying to think. There's something like there's some line thing she says about being treated like an adult or something, and we give it to her. So yeah, it's certainly a rite of passage and a coming of age moment for her.
And it's interesting, we've seen, it's interesting on shows like this, that include, younger characters, that we see them grow up on screen, evolve into their characters, but also we see them get to grow as actors. And of course, Holly Taylor has been getting to, digest a lot more, meatier material and all that. And of course, in season 3, that got much bigger. I imagine in season 4, that will only continue to increase. What has it been like, seeing her grow on the show, from season 1 to now?
It's sort of amazing, for the two of them. Really, you occasionally, for some reason, will catch a glance at season 1, and you look at just the physical difference. Obviously, at that age, the growth is kind of that much more rapid and dramatic. You see just the physical difference is enormous. But yeah, I suppose in a way you're not aware of the growth until you look back. And when you see where she is now, obviously, as we've said, this young adult, you realize that that arc and that journey has been enormous.
And that storyline overall this season, Elizabeth and Philip deciding whether or not to recruit Paige as a spy, it's of course raises a lot of big questions in terms of what Philip's allegiances are. Do you think Philip's reluctance is just a father protecting his daughter, or do you think there's a deeper maybe ambivalence about the overall mission?
I think I've always maintained this. The way I approached it, just to kind of justify a few things in the first episode of season 1, was that I think Philip has reached a point in his life where he fully understands that this lifestyle is a ticking time bomb. It can't be sustained, and the only thing he wants to do is safeguard the longevity of a safe life for his children. And I think the only way for him to do that is to kind of, do the mission as well as he can so that he doesn't get caught. But ultimately, I think his long-term prize is to defect. That to me is what makes the greatest amount of sense. So yes, I do think there's great, it's indifference about the cause for Mother Russia now. It's now a case of survival.
Of course, the other big revelation, and a much different kind of character relationship, of course, was between Martha and Clark, aka Philip. She found out, but she didn't actually turn him in. She actually decided to, basically go along with him for the time at least. Were you surprised that that she didn't turn him in, or that she decides to sort of put her faith in him even after finding out that he's been lying to her?
I did and I didn't. I think that's the other beauty. Dramaturgically, it could have gone either way. That it was on that sort of knife edge precipice moment. Same as Paige. Which way will this go? And very feasibly, she could have turned around and walked straight into Gad's office and spilled the beans. So you have that kind of terror hangover. But it stands up. You look at the history. Bizarrely, these missions. This whole thing about Clark and Martha is based on a lot of truth, that the KGB were doing exactly this in trying to sort of woo and romance women with low-level security clearance and kind of abuse that situation. And that's exactly what's happening. But they would target, lonely people. And I think that's part of why Philip went after Martha, is that, she was a very specific target. So the fact that she decides to stay with him, stands up in that she's found someone that she loves. And for the same thing for Philip, again, it's the same with in some degrees with Paige, in that I think, Philip's relationship with Martha is complex, because I think there's an enormous amount of guilt there about what he's doing. He realizes, he's come to realize she's an innocent in all of this, a very sort of lovely innocent. And what he's doing is manipulating and abusing her in this situation. So I think there's a great amount of relief that she's now complicit and aware of what's going on.
It's interesting after Martha finds out. Not only does Martha sort of go along with him for now at least, but he also, because her finding out, she's suddenly at risk that she's no longer an asset but a liability, and she could be in very great danger. But Philip seems very protective of her, in a way that's more than just as an asset. Do you think part of him really loves her, or is it really just protecting a means to an end?
I'm not sure about love. I think he feels a great degree of responsibility about the position he's put her in. And I think it stems from that. Again, there's a degree of guilt.
Is really great material that brought up for Allison Wright, who plays Martha, but a lot of that happens when she's apart from your character, of course, because he isn't always there to handle her and to try and manipulate her all the time. Did you watch the show when it aired? To see all those great tense scenes she had in the FBI office.
No, I can't. I've kind of stopped. Not just the show in general. I stopped watching myself. I think it does me more damage than good. So I tend to steer clear of it.
Is that helpful in sort of trying to keep the mindset of the character, so that you're just in the character and not sort of involved in seeing what everything else is going on as the show progresses?
Yeah, that to a degree that's a great bonus, but I think I get caught up in I'm ashamed to say, in the slight vanity of it, that if I see something that I don't think looks good, I'll try and avoid it. And I think what that does is it kind of pops you out of the moment. When you're acting, you're like, oh, I'm doing that weird thing with my hands again. It takes you cleanly and completely out of that moment. Therefore, it just helps me to be a bit more present.
It's interesting. One of the major characters who hasn't learned the truth yet about Philip and Elizabeth is actually Stan Beeman, the FBI agent next door. How embarrassed do you think he'll be eventually if he finds out that his secretary and a teenager found out the truth before the agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigations?
Yeah, stands in for a rude awakening, I'm afraid, when that finally happens. I'm sort of hoping that it'll come from Philip. Philip will approach him with defection, and he'll kind of go, wait, what? Over beer and pizza. So I will enjoy that moment enormously, be it Philip's revelation or not. I think it'll be a bitter pill for Stan to swallow.
You mentioned earlier, how the situations with Paige and the situations with Martha for Philip is, sort of brings out this idea of corrupting innocence, or manipulating innocence for their own ends. And of course, Philip had another conflict in that this season. He had to manipulate and sort of seduce a teenage girl in order to get access to intel in her house. And of course, he didn't want to go all the way, and he had he sort of brings up feelings about his own daughter. Were you concerned at any point with how that storyline would play out with audiences, or maybe depending on how it went, how you yourself might end up seeing Philip?
Yeah, no, it worried me enormously, and I approached him about it. I was concerned. It was, again, that's another element of your own. You start to wonder whether it's your own prejudices or vanity or worries. But in the end, I had to approach it like Philip, which makes for interesting drama in that he's incredibly conflicted about it. And this is something he would desperately not want to do. But as I said, the sort of one of his greater objectives at the moment is not to be caught, is to keep everyone alive. And for him to do that, he has to maintain the mission. So, he kind of does it to the best of his ability without trying to cross any lines and skirt it as best he can.
The show introduced this season a new handler for Philip and Elizabeth, and they've had a few over the years. And this time, he was played by Frank Langella, and he's playing such a calm, quiet character, but he still has this really intense, intimidating presence on screen. What was it like working with him and this new dynamic on the show?
It was amazing. You have someone like him come on set. It's like a silverback gorilla has come on. Come on. You have to rise to the challenge. He throws down the gauntlet a bit, and has a very piercing gaze that sort of, you know, ups your own game. It's like any good sportsman coming onto the pitch. You know, the game is upped, and you know, you feel a sense of wanting to do your best for people. You know, certainly for someone like him. It was all, and he's a fantastic raconteur also. Therefore, you know, on-set jokes were the ante was certainly upped.
What kind of stories would he tell and jokes would he tell? You know, between takes, was it hard to sort of go back into that intensity? You know, of the scenes when you know he's you know, that way between takes.
Yeah, you know, he's beyond a professional, so he knows when to and when not to. But yeah, just sort of certain anecdotes. He's been in the business kind of, you know, 55 years. He's there isn't really anything he hasn't done, you know. So from just dropping in conversations about having lunch with JFK and things like that, it's pretty amazing.
You know, one of Philip and Elizabeth's previous handlers, you know, Claudia, who was played by Margot Martindale, she made another appearance in season 3, and it was a brief appearance, but you know, she's been such a fan favorite on the show. Do you think there are any plans for her to return to the show on a more regular basis in the future?
I would love it if her and Frank Langella sort of began a torrid affair and basically then defected themselves, or actually had their own, you know, their own handler spin-off called Too Hot to Handle or something like that. I'd love to see more of Margot, and I think her and Frank together were sort of pretty electric. So if there was a way of combining the two, I think that would be the ideal.
There's so many different story threads on the show. You know, so Philip and Elizabeth aren't always interacting with the other actors or the other storylines. You know, like Nina this year, she was in Russia, and the Residentura, and of course all the stuff with the FBI office. Is there any story thread or group of actors you especially wish you could get to work with more on the show?
Yeah, you know, the Russians. We never see them, let alone act with them. They're always on different days. You know, our crossovers are so few and far between. I'd love to act, you know, a lot more. Or I'd love just once. I mean, I did once with Lev. That was about it.
It's so interesting, you know, those worlds are sort of so compartmentalized and separate that it really feels like if and when any of them sort of come together, it would just be this incredible crashing, this meeting of worlds. It would be really dramatic.
Yeah, but good telly.
And you know, your co-star Noah Emmerich, you know, he actually directed an episode this season, and you've been in the position yourself of directing your fellow actors since you did direct episodes of Brothers and Sisters. What's it like for it to be the other way around? You know, to be directed by one of your co-stars?
Fantastic, because they know where you're coming from, how you like to work. They're actors themselves, so they like to, you know, they challenge you in a way I'm sure they would like to be challenged. They know to sort of from the perspective of the actor, which is so rare and lovely to have.
Did you, you know, since you'd done it before, did you give him any advice or maybe give him, you know, any of the cast give him a hard time while he was directing?
Noah Emmerich needs no advice. He's an absolute natural. He was incredibly impressive as a director. Not, you know, all of us, not just with the actors, not just our notes. I think his you know, his vision and his own use of camera was very impressive. So no, he's an absolute natural.
The Critics' Choice Awards were handed out a few weeks ago, and after a few nominations, the Americans won Best Drama Series for the first time. And Joe Weisberg, the creator of the show, in his speech, he was talking about how grateful he was for critics supporting the show that doesn't necessarily have the highest ratings, and helped keep the show going. You know, has that support from critics, you know, been meaningful to you also?
Yeah, you know, it's certainly a new phenomenon even for me, that just to have a sort of backing from as many critics as we do, you know, as much as we scold and scathe them so often. You know, of course we're fickle creatures. It's nice when they're on our side. So, you know, I'm glad that the complexity of the writing is really recognized, and they thoroughly deserve that.
Do you have any knowledge of when you're going to go back to work for season 4, or when you're going to start seeing scripts?
We have no idea. They're in the room at the moment. They have been for a couple of weeks. You know, we get the occasional email like, "Oh my God, wait till you see what happens." So yeah, they're figuring out the arcs at the moment, and then we probably won't start getting an idea until late September.
So no leaks have come out about, oh, wait till you see, Philip jumps off a cliff, or nothing like that.
They like to tease us. They do like to tease us, but no, there's been no definite reports.
Well, I wanna wish you the best of luck on the next season of The Americans, and continued critical support for the show. Hopefully, Emmy support finally this year. It was great talking to you today.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we finally made it work.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Thanks a million.